ELI5. Why does it matter how many decimals pi has? Thank you so much for all the answers. I understand a little better now. Practical value. Very little. Other than a good benchmark for computing power. Indirect value. Well, if you ever want a clumsy way to get what we believe to be a non-repeating, patternless random stream of digits, you can just start any place and start reading. Well, it has infinite. We know that. Is your question why supercomputers are still trying to identify more digits? If so, that's mainly for show news, but also can be used to see how much faster and or more powerful they are than previous models, a geekbench of sorts. Mathematical problems and the real world have an odd relationship. A lot of internet security protocols are dependent on some fairly esoteric maths which when devised, seemed about as useful as finding the 10,000th decimal place of pi. Similarly, the numerical methods used to estimate space re-entry was devised hundreds of years beforehand. This topic, and the answers within it, make me realize that I don't even fully understand what pi even is, or why it was given a value of 3.14 etc. in the first place. I mean, I know it's used to calculate circumference, but I don't know why it is, how it was found, and how new decimal places are even calculated to begin with. One aspect that hasn't been addressed is that pi is an irrational number, meaning it cannot be expressed as a fraction. An implication of this is that the digits go on forever. If the digits stopped, then it would be possible to express pu as a fraction. I want to emphasize that the fact that pi is irrational is mathematically proven. Computers calculating digits have nothing to do with this proof. It doesn't. It's basically a memorization problem. There's a really cool point in math where you realize numbers can't be described in the same way. Not many people care about the square root of 2e, or, well, I guess tons of people do. Never mind. I just want to chime in on some grumpy old man shit and say that knowing more digits of pi does not mean you have a deeper, more meaningful understanding of its significance. It just means you spend a lot of time memorizing a sequence of numbers. I use pi every day to solve all sorts of problems and I know 2 digits. Also, why does nobody brag about knowing 100 digits of E? E gets no respect and it's just as important as pi. If you want your mind blown, then take an hour and learn a little about it. And think about it. There are a few dozen things in science that blow literally everyone's minds once they click. And this is one of them. Other cool thing. When your mind does get blown, know you're feeling the same thing as Hawking's, Newton, Einstein, Oppenheimer did at some point in their lives. It has an infinite number. So does 22.7, which is a rational approximation that is good enough for most everyday uses. This is one of my nightmares. I sometimes wake in the middle of the night and my brain is trying to do an exercise that, if put on paper, is the equivalent of trying to figure out the definite number to an infinite graph. And it's like my brain says, if you can't stop this, you'll die. And I get morbid anxiety and have to go drink 3 ice-cold glasses of water. Can't explain what happens in that nightmare. The feeling is beyond words. Just that it feels like something spins out of control and can never be put back. Really hard to explain. Does not really matter. For calculation, only a number or numbers or the decimals are required. But until now, pi it's used for performance test, memory test, etc. Pi is an irregular constant and even to this day it can't be simplified to a specific number, aka repeating pattern after the decimal point. It's just a neat mathematical fact. I want to know how we can be certain that pi never resolves. Calculating pi is basic raw mathematical computing power. So it's a good benchmark that pretty much any system can do. It's the equivalent of a software developer's Hello World program. Sure, they could compute pretty much anything, but it's just kind of tradition that it's pi. Pi has only one decimal. It's between 3 and 1. The numbers to the right of the decimal are fractional numbers, also called decimal places. Sometimes humans do pointless things just to be the one to do it. Look at the Guinness Book of I Did It Better Than You. To calculate the circumference of the universe including expansion down to an accuracy of 1 Planck length, the smallest physical size, and not taking into account weird quantum mechanical effects you might get on that scale, you would need 63 digits. But, as I understand it, and I might be wrong here, we still don't know enough digits of pi to calculate the volume of the universe within an accuracy of 1 cubic Planck length. So there might be some niche reason within the fields of astro and quantum physics to hunt for even more digits of pi. Because if it has a finite number of decimal number, then math has to be almost rewritten. We have to celebrate whenever we find a new decimal. The number of digits isn't the thing that matters. What matters is that there is no way of writing down pi that doesn't use advanced math that has instructions that, literally, go on forever. We can't express an exact value for pi at all. As far as we know, we can only ever get closer and closer. That's weird. It's a very important fact about how the universe works, and one that anyone with a few pieces of string can measure, but that we still don't fully understand thousands of years later. I've seen reference before to the simulated universe hypotheses that if pi has no end it can act as some sort of proof. Not a physicist. Can't say what for. The way that numbers are represented as symbols is a convenience for people. They help us learn and teach more easily. They help us communicate ideas. The symbols are a written language for putting math to paper. Exactly like writing your native language is a way of putting spoken ideas to paper. Your ideas can be expressed in another human language. Same thing for math. So it doesn't matter because pi doesn't have decimals, rather, some of its written representations do. Pi is a very specific number, a number with infinite digits. Any number that does not have infinite digits is not pi. With each additional digit we add, we are getting closer to approximating the actual value. It is impractical and unnecessary to use infinite digits. But using too few may not produce a suitably accurate answer to a calculation. Depending on what you are calculating, the diameter of a tire versus the orbital radius of a spacecraft, more digits may be necessary to achieve the required precision. If pi ever repeats or ends, it would mean that spheres and circles do not exist in reality. You could not create a circle anymore. You could only create a shape with trillions upon trillions of sides. Roundness would no longer exist in reality. IRC somewhere in the first few hundred digits there is a sequence of 999,999 feet. Rounding up at that point would have been perfectly okay with me. But I'll never get over the fact that pi isn't the square root of 10. In addition to what everyone else has said, it is interesting, if not important, to generate the digits of pi in a pure math sense. We know relatively so little about transcendental numbers. Having more data to work with to tease out the properties of this area of math might one day prove crucial to future advances in STEM. It matters how many decimals pi has because it can affect the accuracy of calculations that use pi as a value. The more decimals of pi that are used, the more accurate the calculations will be. For example, if pi is used in a calculation for a scientific or engineering project, having more decimals of pi can make the difference between success or failure. It doesn't. We usually use it to benchmark computing power and also to check if it is in fact not repeating, but we really don't need to know.